Hi, it's Penny here, and today I'm going to go through my reading stats spreadsheet, and we're just going to look at a bunch of graphs and numbers and see what's interesting in there. I mean, I'm assuming if you've clicked on this video, then you're like me, you love stats and graphs. So I have a spreadsheet where I track all my reading, and I have a bunch of graphs that kind of get generated from that. To be honest, my spreadsheet is somewhat messy, and every year I tell myself I'm going to tidy it up and make it better, and sometimes I make some progress on that, but I always seem to add more things that make it more messy. Okay, I just got distracted by an important email that came through, but let's once again look at the reading spreadsheet. So let's start on my spreadsheet just about the amount of books I read. So in 2024, I read 180 books. And you can see my reading kind of throughout the year was a bit up and down. Specifically, the worst month in terms of volume of books was July. That's because we moved from a city 6 hours away to this city. It was a big thing. In fact, the whole year has been affected by moving stuff and house selling stuff and house buying stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how my reading changes next year. I also noticed that I read less books in December as well as July. So July, I know I was moving. I think December, it was mainly just the lead up to Christmas, enjoying summer, but also I had a bunch of stress with selling my old house. So I guess that's the main reason. I couldn't really tell you why I read so much in February. Oh, actually, I suspect in February I read a lot of graphic novels. So actually, let's just jump to that spreadsheet. I also have a spreadsheet which shows the split of different formats, so graphic, text, and audio. And you can see I read 40% of my reading, 75 books was graphic novels. So that is a lot. I actually have another spreadsheet where I've been tracking things since 2020. And if you look at formats since 2020, you can see the amount of graphic stuff I read this year was up by a significant amount. And I think that really was just while I was doing this whole house moving thing, it was nice to have something as kind of a break, or something that I could easily just pick up and put down, and something that wasn't too mentally taxing. So that's why I read a lot of graphic books. Oh, I should also say, I think last year was it? I lose track of dates. Anyway, it was near the beginning of first having moved in with my boyfriend, so living with someone else for the first time. And that's definitely also why I read more graphics percentage-wise, I think, just because it's something you can do while someone else is there, and it doesn't matter if they're a little bit distracting. So, because graphic novels are up so much this year, I have actually done a lot of my stats, or looked at them what would they be if there weren't graphic novels included in the stats. So I didn't actually do just a general books read monthly without the graphics. However, I know, so while I said I read 180 books in total, 105 of those were not graphics. You can do that maths off the basic format graph, can't you? And in terms of comparing that to previous years, 180 is heaps, but if you look at the number of books I read without graphics over the years, I actually read less this year. So with graphics, I read more than I ever have. Without graphics, I read less than I have in all the previous years that I've been tracking. So I really don't know whether that's going to be a continuing trend or not, because I don't know whether the reasons why I was reading a lot of graphic novels in 2024 are going to persist or not. I really do need to tidy up this spreadsheet. It's so all over the place. I do also have some stats around pages read per year. So this year I read 32,533 pages, which, as you can see, is up from previous years. So the total number of pages I've read without graphics is 18,000. That's a big difference, isn't it? If you look at I do have a graph of pages read monthly, and then I also have a graph of pages read monthly. Oh, this says graphic. Is this just graphic? What is this spreadsheet? Penny, you need to tidy up your spreadsheet. Okay, so this is the number of pages I was reading for graphic novels each month. February, a lot. Other ones, not so much. July, none. That's weird, since that's the big moving month, although maybe that's why I didn't read so many books in the month of July compared to the other months. Oh, here's pages read monthly, not on graphic. It's definitely still got the same kind of profile as the other ones. I don't know what conclusions I'm drawing from that, because I'm not necessarily mad or not mad about the amount of graphic novels I read. I'm kind of ambivalent about it. One thing as well I do have stats on is the hours read per year. So I will note that in 2024, that was the least amount of audiobook hours I read of the previous years. And again, I think that's living with somebody else, but also like moving meant I was doing a lot of moving activities where I wasn't listening to anything. I'm trying to work out the years. I actually think 2022, was I working and doing a lot of commuting, or was I not working and doing a lot of house cleaning? Honestly, I have no idea. That's concerning that I have no idea what I've been doing with my life. I don't know. Let's stop talking about the amount I've read. I've filmed for 10 minutes. Penny, you probably have to cut this down significantly. Okay, so then we talk about average rating. So average rating per year, you can see in 2024 is 3.47, which is the highest it's been. And if you look at kind of the distribution over the years, you can see I gave like the most 5 stars that I've ever given. And then like very few 1 and 2 stars, just a few 3 stars, and like mostly 4 stars, which are books that I kind of think are really solid or really great, maybe with just a few qualms that don't really matter. So I'm really happy with that distribution. And I think that's because I purposefully, or I like finally got to a bunch of books that I've been anticipating for a long time. I do have a graph of my average rating throughout the year. You can see August was really low. If we look at why, it's because we had a 1 star. My only 1 star of the whole year was in August. I also reread all of White Sands, which were not great. Had a couple of DNFs, a couple of disappointments like Severance and Untold Tales of I Hate Fairyland. Just a bunch of disappointments in that month, I think. But like overall, pretty happy with my average rating and the ratings I was achieving throughout the year. Or I guess more happy about the books that I was picking throughout the year. And hopefully I can do even better in 2025, because I feel like a lot of 2024 I was trying to complete series, and it wasn't really until the end of the year. Did I show you the graph of my average rating throughout the year? I feel like I've decided to film this on a day when I'm a mess. Oh yes, I did, because I was just telling you that August was the worst, but you can see after August it really bumped up, and I think that's because I finished a lot of my obligation reads and I really got into picking up a bunch of series I had been anticipating for the whole year or like longer, and so hopefully that is going to continue in 2025, because I have also been doing that project where I try the first chapter of all the series I want to try, and that has kind of bubbled up a bunch of series that I'm super excited for now, and so I'm hoping that most of those are going to deliver, and then that should mean an amazing reading year. Should do. I do also have a tiny graph here about the split of series to standalones. So about 30% of my reading was standalones, and then 70% of the books were series. So I think that shows that I have been focusing on series. I don't really have any like historical record of this stat though, so I don't know if that's normal or not. Maybe that's something I need to try and put together when I tidy up the spreadsheet. Okay, what else? Oh, I do also have this graph about the average page length for the books I'm reading. It's always much lower than I expect. Like this year, it says the average page length was 248 pages, which seems really short. Then I thought, it's probably all those graphic novels affecting that. So I made another graph of average page length, not including the graphic novels. And it's still only 334. And like, when you compare it to previous years, it's only 2022 where it was lower. Did I read a lot of graphic novels in 2022? Not really. Maybe I read a lot of short stories for some reason. That's weird. Anyway, all of those stats are lower than I would have expected. I think that even though I do read some longer books, I obviously read a lot more shorter ones than I think. Or maybe, actually, I have another stat about the average audiobook length, which has gone down since the last couple of years, but in general is higher than it was before that. I'm wondering if I've just been reading a lot of longer books via audio because I know that's an easier way to get through them. Maybe I need to try and validate some of these assumptions later. Okay, what else do we have here? I have a graph here about where I got my books from. There is a more detailed graph about all the different places, which kind of says that only 8.9% of my books are books like actually off my TBR, but that does make sense because I've gotten very close to TBR 0 and I haven't been buying any more books. I've kind of got 15% books from the library and 15% audiobooks from the library, so that's 30% from the library. Oh, ebooks. Actually, ebooks were massive for me in 2024. I must have a graph of this over the years, do I? Oh, I've only done it like digital analog audio, but you can see digital has gone up massively this year, while audio has gone down recently. I already talked about why I'm listening to less audiobooks, but digital has gone up a lot, and I think that's just because I got a Kobo. So there's that. But also there are a lot of books I couldn't get easily physically. And now that we have moved to a town, like I guess the whole second half of the year, we've been living in a town where the library system isn't as big. And so they don't have as many physical books. And so there have been a lot of books I can't even get from the library, and I haven't been buying any books. So my only real option is either library ebooks or buying the ebooks. Mostly, I've still been able to get ebooks from my old library, so they have a lot of ebooks available. So I think it's still mostly been library ebooks. Yeah, so 36.7% library ebooks and then 8.9%. My graph says Kindle, but it's actually Kindle or Kobo. I've just been too lazy to update my spreadsheet. Maybe I'll change the name. Ooh, that might break everything. Let's not do it. But I've just been too lazy to update that to be Kindle or Kobo. I would actually like the stats between Kindle and Kobo to know how I'm using them. And then I have 3.3% of things that I just read on the web. However, I have recently figured out that I can easily put things on the web onto my Kobo to read them, which is like 1,000,000 times easier. So I'll be doing that going forward, but I don't know, should I still be recording that I got it from the web, even if I read it on my Kobo? Anyway, ebooks were the winner this year for sure. And I do also have a graph here of like borrowed versus owned. So it looks like 70.6% borrowed versus 30%. Let's say 70% borrowed, 30% owned books. And then if I look at the average star rating by format, honestly, it doesn't matter if they were owned or borrowed. So I guess that's not really relevant to my enjoyment of the book. I actually have a thing here as well about the average star by format. So analog, audio, and digital. Again, very even across the board. So that's kind of saying that the format doesn't impact my enjoyment. Oh, it's a little bit confusing in my spreadsheet now. I'm seeing I've got average star rating by format, and then I've got another sheet called format where I'm going graphic text and audio, which is different than digital text and audio. I need to work out better words to describe those concepts, I guess. So I think I already looked at this though, because this is where I said I read a lot of graphic books this year, and yeah, that is what it is. Let's talk about genre. So as always, fantasy is a massive part of this pie, 62%. I did manage to get 25% sci-fi though, which I'm pretty happy with, because I definitely was trying to read more sci-fi. And I'm pretty sure actually that little section of contemporary is mostly just Babysitter's Club graphic novels, because I did also run genres without graphic novels, and it's not too different, but we've got a lot less genres. So I think pretty much horror and contemporary were only graphic things that I read. And then sci-fi gets to be a lot bigger without graphic novels, which is good. Also, when I look at average star rating by genre, sci-fi is the highest. So I'm definitely going to be trying to pick up more sci-fi in 2025. And weirdly, horror was the lowest average rating at only 2.7. What horror books did I read? We know they were all graphics. Oh. So mostly it's the Promised Neverland graphic novel series or manga series that I ended up DNFing, and so it's from volume 6 to 15. It was really the ones prior to volume 6 that I really loved. I can definitely see that the series drops off. I also tried Remina by Junji Ito, which was one of my most disappointing books of the year, so yeah, that'll be why horror is so low. But I did read The Night Eaters, Her Little Reapers, which I really love. So there definitely are horror books I can love. And I probably should have picked some up physically last year. Maybe have to try and make sure I pick up a little bit of horror in 2025. I think my problem is I don't really know what kind of horror books I like. I know that I can like them, but I also know that I can really hate them. So like, how do I find the ones that I like? I don't know. If we look at genre and how it's changed over the years, honestly, it hasn't changed that much other than that I've been reading more sci-fi, which I think we're happy about. Then I have another spreadsheet here, which is about release date. Now, I still don't really know what is my goal with this. I can see here I read 13.3% new releases, so books that were released in 2024. And if I look back over the years, how has that changed? Oh, I don't even have it over the years. That's something I would like to look at, actually. So I honestly don't know really what my target is. You can see here, I'm mostly reading newer books with a few olderish ones. Actually, the graph I find the most interesting here is the average star rating by release date, because you can see it's kind of pretty steady over like books released in the last decade. Then there is kind of like a bump of books released in maybe the first 15 years of the 2000s. I wonder if that's just because the only books that have kind of remained on my TBR since that time are ones that have like stood the test of time. And then you might say that that argument should also hold for books from the 90s and 80s and before. But I think part of the problem with that, let's look at what books I read that were from the 80s and 90s or before. So there's just 6 books. One is The Bone People, which was one of my most disappointing books of the year. Oh, I DNF'd it actually, but I still rate DNFs. Then as well we have Children of Men, which is kind of a classic. I don't always get along with classics, but I actually was loving Children of Men for the first half, and then it went down quite a lot. Actually, there's a lot of sci-fi on this list. The Jaren books are 3 of the books on this list that all got kind of like 2.5, 3 stars. They're kind of like sci-fi romance, which isn't really my genre, and I read them more like as a gift to pass to me, teenage me, or 20-year-old me who had started this series. The only real good rating on this list of earlier books is I've Never Known Men, which I gave 4 stars. So I think when I pick up books from the 90s and before, I often have weird reasons for picking them up, and I don't always know whether I'm gonna like them, but we're just giving them a go anyway. Okay, then I also have a spreadsheet about like the target demographic of the books, so whether they're adult, middle grade, YA. I think I had a goal to get 75% adult books or more this year, and it doesn't look like I achieved it. Oh, actually. So I've only got 72.8% adult books if you include graphic novels, but if I take them out, it's 85%. And I think that's because a lot of the graphic novels I picked up were actually manga that are more targeted at a younger age group, or at least I count them as YA. I don't actually know whether that's right. So I guess you could look at it as I've achieved my goal. If I look at that over the years, I haven't got it over the years without graphics, but with graphics, it was actually the second best year. 2021 was better. And then I always seem to read a very similar amount of middle grade and YA. I do know if I look at my average star rating by target demographic, middle grade always does amazingly well. I think it's because the middle grade books I pick up are ones I know I'm going to love. YA books, I'm normally taking a risk, but for whatever reason, I think it's worth a go. And then adult books are pretty close to my average rating. Okay, then the next couple of sheets I have here are more about the authors, some kind of attempt to keep myself accountable or just check in as to whether I'm reading diversely. So firstly, I've got author gender. So I've got kind of about half and half, male and female, and then various as ones where there's multiple authors and then of different genders, which I think usually kind of is mostly graphic novels. I do actually have a graph without graphic novels, and you can see various is a lot lower. And we're still pretty much half and half, maybe females a little bit higher without graphic novels. And if I look at my average rating per gender, the males are winning this year. I actually think that's different from previous years, but I don't have that readily available. But I guess overall male and female is pretty even, so it probably doesn't matter. And then various I think is lower just because I suspect graphic novels are lower. Do I have a graph about that? It doesn't say graphic novels are lower. Then why is various lower? Let me look at what books I marked various for gender. Most of them, there's a bunch of do you know it's Alona Andrews? Because Alona Andrews, I read a bunch of their stuff this year, and they're a husband and wife writing duo. That's what it is. And also, almost all of those I rated very highly. Wait, does that explain the maths? I feel like this is beyond my mathematical ability to work out in my head. it really doesn't make sense to me. I'm going to have to think about that one. I do have a graph of over the years, and it makes me a little bit sad because this is one of the lowest in terms of female authors, but also the highest in terms of various, which again will be because of the graphic novels. Also much less non-binary authors than last year. I think that's because I was binging a bunch of Sarah Gailey last year, maybe. Anyway, it's pretty even, so I'm probably fine with that. Then we have author race. Now, where are we at with this? So I think I actually had a goal of reading less than 5%, that would be amazing, less than 65% white authors in the year, and I can see, I thought I had done it, but I must have just added a couple of ones at the end that ruined it, so that's annoying. 66.1% white authors. I always say my goal is to try and make this graph look like this other graph I have, which is the population distribution of New Zealand, because it makes sense that the authors I'm reading from should be like a similar representation, like a similar distribution spread to the population of where I live. Does that make sense? Maybe, maybe not. But anyway, you can see my actual graph. There are a lot of like other or multiple, and once again, I think that's because of graphic novels. Quite often you have like a team of people working on graphic novels, and they will be of different races or different ethnicities. So I did actually make a graph of this without graphic novels, and I was very disappointed in myself to discover that when I made that graph, like the other goes right down, but the white authors way up, 85%. So that's clearly something I'm gonna have to do something about. I feel like a lot of the time when I know I'm reading too many white authors, I'll look for something to read that's like from an author of color, and graphic novels are often the easiest thing to add to my TBR, because I also feel like a lot of the time the way that I'm setting up, the way I'm choosing my TBRs, I don't always have a lot of choice because I've been trying to finish series, trying to just finish books that I already owned. I don't know, I can make a lot of excuses, but really I should just make plans to do better. So I will try and come up with some tactics, but yeah, it was definitely very interesting to make that graph without graphics, which I've never done before. If I look at how it's kind of gone over the years, which I do also have, you can see if I include graphic novels, like this was the year I'd gotten white authors down to the lowest. However, if I don't include graphic novels, white authors is the highest it's been since 2020. So I feel like this year I was using graphics more and more as my way of getting people of color into my reading. And I mean, it's not entirely unreasonable, but also I think I could do better. I mean, I have done better, so I know I can. I also think I'm gonna fall into a maths rabbit hole again. My average star rating by author race, other and multiple, is the highest average rating. I also don't know how I feel about the existence of this graph at all, but it's a statistic. Other and multiple is the highest. Now, as I just said before, I think this is mostly graphic novels. But what did I say about graphic novels before? The same level, the same average rating as the other formats. So does anything I'm saying even make sense? Mathematically, I really want to try and make some better graphs to like help myself really understand what's going on here and know what books are getting me the most of everything I want. I don't know. You can also see, so one thing I'm very annoyed about actually is you can see I read very few Maori authored books this year, and that was something I was doing really well at, and I clearly dropped off at that. But you can see the ones I did pick up, very high average rating compared to the others. I mean, there's not that much of a difference. I will say Pacific authored books is the lowest. That's because I only picked up one. I found it really hard to find books by Pacific Islander authors. So I picked up one, didn't really like it. So that's a shame. And I would also say I think Asian is definitely influenced by The Promised Neverland, which I talked about before. I don't know. I mean, does it even make sense to look at this? I think actually what I do get from this is it shows me whether I'm finding the books by authors of different ethnicities that meet my taste. It's very easy to just pick up a bunch of books that you don't like to tick some boxes, but that's not helpful for authors of minorities. Like, it's great to pick them up and then be able to rave about them, but it's not actually supportive to pick them up and hate them. So when you're reading for diversity, it needs to still be reading for enjoyment as well. So I think actually that's what I'm trying to check with my average star rating, which I know I didn't do so well with Pacific authors. And clearly I did a lot better with Maori authors in terms of picking ones that I would like. Oh, I only have one more graph, I think, which is basically new to me authors versus authors I've read before. So like 80% of the books I read were by authors I'd read before and only 20% were new. As I said, I've been reading a lot of series, and I only ever count the first book in the series as a new to me author. So then as soon as I start a series by a new author, most of those books count as authors I've read before, which I don't know if that's right either. In terms of average rating, authors I've read before are much higher. That's probably not a surprise, right? But good to have it confirmed. And good to guess confirm that I'm not like hate reading a bunch of authors. Like I'm thinking right now that my library has just offered to me via Skip the Line the latest Wayward Children book. And I haven't been enjoying the latest books of that. So I'm trying to like avoid picking that up. I don't know why the library is trying to tempt me, because I shouldn't continue reading authors, even if I've loved some stuff by them before. Oh, I don't know. Like if I've loved stuff by them before and then I've stopped loving some of their stuff, there's always a chance they'll go back to writing the stuff I loved from them before, right? I don't want to give up on some authors. I want to keep hope. Anyway, I think that is all my stats. Is it? Maybe. I don't really know how I feel about all those stats. Does it make me feel like I had a successful reading year? I definitely read a lot. As I said, more books than I've read in previous years. And the average rating was higher. And I'm happy that I read more science fiction books. And I have actually been very happy as well that I've been able to read more ebooks and make use of my Kobo. Actually, I should say the reason why I upgraded from a Kindle to a Kobo is because I can actually read library books on my Kobo, which I can't do on the Kindle in New Zealand. So the Kobo enabling me to read ebook library books, amazing. I guess the main thing I see is something I need to improve on is like reading diversely. I should also say like I'm only really tracking ethnicity, race in this, and there's lots of other kinds of diversity. I just find it really hard to track other kinds of diversity without feeling like too intrusive on authors' lives. Like even with race, if I start looking into an author and it's not obviously clear, or I know some authors have like complicated relationships with their ancestry, or like if they're biracial, I tend to just put them into various multiple, like they don't know, I don't know, it's complicated, whatever. And I think that might also be part of why other/multiple was higher this year, because I just didn't want to be too intrusive, just so that I can track a stat that isn't necessarily the be all and end all of diversity anyway. And I think it's actually like gone out of fashion to some degree to look at author race. But I still kind of want to hold myself accountable because, I mean, as we've just seen, I haven't been doing as well as I thought I would do. And I think it's really easy to think that you're doing better than you are. So that's why we like stats, right? It gives us a bunch of information that we might not otherwise pick up on. And I think that's the main thing I got out of looking at these stats. So let me know, what other stats do you think would be good for me to track? I'm going to say that I'm definitely going to try and improve my stats spreadsheet over the next year, but we'll see. I guess I won't promise it, but I'm going to try. So let me know if you have any suggestions about stats that you track or stats you think would be cool to track. Let me know if you have any thoughts about any of the stats that I did go through. Let me know actually how you track different reading stats. Like I have recently started using Storygraph, and I do like a lot of their graphs actually. In the beginning, I wasn't so sure, and I'm coming around to them. So let me know how you track your reading stats, or if you don't bother, because I will admit it can get a bit overwhelming at times, which is why my spreadsheet's such a mess. Do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.